Good morning, everyone. I would like to welcome all who are present here with us, as well as those who are viewing and listening to us, to the 13th meeting of the Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity. This public hearing is being broadcast live on Parliament Channel 11, Parliament Radio 105 FM, 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. I'd like to welcome the officials from the Ministry of National Security with us, those from the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, those from Vision on a Mission, and I would like to welcome you to today's public hearing. My name is Dr. Nian Gazidoli, and I'm the chairman of this Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity, and I would like to invite the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right.
Kazim Hussein, Member, Senator.
Good morning all. Glenda Jennings-Smith, Member of Parliament and Member of Committee.
Good morning, I am Randall Mitchell, Member.
Yes, good morning, I am Senator Dineshwar Mahabir, Member of the Committee.
Can I ask now that the members who are with us, the officials with us, introduce themselves?
Good morning, members of the committee. I'm Vel Lewis, Permanent Secretary of the Ministry.
Good morning. My name is Cecil Duke, Acting Commissioner of Prisons, Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service.
Good morning. My name is Dean Clark, Acting Deputy Commissioner of Prisons.
Pleasant morning to the committee. I am Carlos Crespi, Acting Assistant Commissioner of Prisons.
Good morning. My name is John Roger, Chairman of the Board of Vision on Mission.
Good morning. I am Gordon Husbands, Board Member, Director of Vision on Mission.
Good morning. I'm Joseph Nelson. I'm Acting Superintendent of Prisons.
Good morning. I'm Mark Lutchman, Project Manager with the Ministry of National Security.
Thank you so much to you all for being with us this morning. Conditions in our overcrowded prisons are inhumane and unacceptable, particularly so in the remand yard. And this is a quote from the 2013 report, No Time to Quit, by Professor Selwyn Ryan, page 263. The Joint Select Committee on Human Rights, Equality and Diversity has the duty, among other things, to consider from time to time government's compliance with national and international human rights instruments to which Trinidad and Tobago is a party. The UN Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner defines human rights as the rights inherent to all human beings, whatever our nationality, place of residence, sex, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other status. The UN Declaration on Human Rights, Article 5 states, "No one shall be subjected to torture or to cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment." While the UN Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners state that all prisoners shall be treated with the respect due to their inherent dignity and value as human beings. With regard to the mandate of this Joint Select Committee, and statements such as those made by Professor Ryan and others regarding the physical conditions of Remand Yard over the years, the committee considers it a priority to consider the physical conditions at Remand Yard, the recommendations which have been advanced for their improvement, and the status of implementation of these recommendations. With that in mind, the objectives of this inquiry are to determine the treatment of remandees in the Remand Yard Prison, to examine the physical conditions of the facilities at the Remand Yard Prison, and to evaluate the implementation of recommendations with respect to remandee conditions at the Remand Yard Prison within the following reports. The 2002 final report of the Cabinet-appointed Task Force on Prison Reform and the 2013 Special Prisons Committee report. During today's hearing, viewers and listeners can send the committee questions related to today's topic via email on parl101@ttparliament.org, on facebook.com@ttparliament, and on Twitter @ttparliament. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge receipt of comments that came in via Facebook, also via the website. I'd also like to acknowledge stakeholder submissions that were received from the Office of the Ombudsman and the public submission from the Caribbean Center for Human Rights. At this time, I would like to invite brief opening remarks from Mr. Val Lewis, Mr. Cecil Duke, Mr. John Rouget, and I'd ask Mr. Val Lewis to begin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Again, good morning to you, Madam Chairman, and members of the committee. As Permanent Secretary with responsibility for the divisions under the Ministry of National Security, including, of course, the prison service, I want to thank you for the invitation to meet and to address some of the concerns relative to human rights within our prisons, and particularly with respect to the remand prison. This, we believe, provides us with the opportunity to highlight some of the initiatives which we are presently undertaking and implementing in ensuring that basic human rights are adhered to. We continue to assiduously review and explore initiatives to address the issues, even with the economic challenges with which we are faced today. We are hopeful, Madam Chairman and members, that from this meeting, further support could be garnered as we move forward to ensure a humane environment in the prisons, especially for persons in the remand prison. And I'm certain that by the end of today's session, you would agree that the officers of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service have been able to maintain even the basic UN standards and perhaps even have surpassed those standards. With those few words, Madam Chairman, I want to leave it there for this time.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cecil Duke.
Good morning, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I will be very brief, but what I would like to say, we as prison officers and members of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, we are charged with managing the lives of people sent to us from the court. Two things that I would like to basically raise is, one, the fact that we are being here to supervise persons who would have come to us, particularly in this case, the remand prisoners, who, based on what would have been taking place in the court, find themselves having to remain inordinate length of time with us. The other side of the coin there is the fact that we are operating from what we consider an aging plant. The physical environment in the remand prison particularly, to a great extent, circumscribe what we could do in terms of managing the lives of these persons. Nevertheless, we utilize all the information coming to us, all the criticisms, and we are trying as best as possible to mitigate the circumstances that exist in Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service, particularly at the remand prison. We would have taken on board many of the recommendations in the task force report and particularly in the report of 2013. And as we are here this morning, we are willing to contribute and let the committee know what we have done in these regards. I have here with me this morning Mr. Clark, who was particularly instrumental in managing a lot of these development programs as we go along, and also Mr. Nelson, who is the Superintendent of Prisons Remand presently, who over time would assist me in assisting the committee in terms of our deliberation this morning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Duke. And Mr. Roger?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Vision and Mission is an NGO, and however, it is linked to the national, the prison, not the, sorry, my dear, national security, right? What has happened is that we, the Vision and Mission, have been working with the prison system coming out of the national security, where we have been preparing children, the inmates, along with the prison system, to prepare them for their re-entry into the community. So one of the things that we are doing is that we are concerned with the inmates while they are in the prison system, because when they are through the prison system, quite a number of them come to Vision and Mission to continue the process that they have been doing. And what we are looking at as well is the whole issue of the community, because in the long run, we are part of the community, and therefore we work with them in Vision and Mission to ensure that they can get themselves together as it relates to the community. Because once they come from the prison system into the Vision and Mission organization, very soon they would be leaving and going to their community. And we, the Vision and Mission organization, are working to continue what was done in the prison system to get it done right in the community. One of the things is this, is that we are aware that the inmates of the prison system will eventually, let us say probably about 90 or thereabout, would be leaving the prison system and coming into the community. And therefore, as a result of that, we have been working with the prison system to deal with them, to get them to be in the kind of position that is required as it relates to being law-abiding within the community as a whole. And this is what we focus on, and as a result of that, we have done quite a lot of work as far as that is concerned, and we have seen the results that, that we have done as it relates to that. And we're hoping that we can continue to do more than that as it relates to the inmates coming into the community, because we are also looking at deportees as well. And these deportees, that's one of the problems that we have with the deportees, because of the fact that most of them would have left Trinidad and Tobago as children, and they have been deported back to Trinidad and Tobago, and they have some serious problems as far as that is concerned, and therefore we have to deal with them in Vision and Mission to get them to get themselves organized as we expect them to be for this whole issue of Trinidad and Tobago and the country of Trinidad and Tobago. My good friend here, Gordon Husbands, is one of the monitor and evaluation person in Vision and Mission, and he has been doing quite a big job as far as getting this thing together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Raji. As we start or begin the questioning segment of the public hearing, I would like to establish that there have been quite a number of reports done which have spoken to the conditions at Remand Yard and how they can be improved. Quite a number of recommendations made. And we are trying to establish as one of our main priorities how those recommendations have been implemented, what is the status of progress, what are some of the challenges to that implementation, and how those can be surmounted. So, just reminding members of the committee as well as the officials to direct your questions to the chair as we begin this segment. And I'd like to lead off with the first question, and I think this may be to Mr. Duke or Mr. Lewis. I'm not sure which one would be able to deal with it. The prison rules, and I'm speaking from the submissions that were given, the prison rules that guide the governance of the remand section were designed in 1943, if I'm correct, based on the submission that would have come to us. What I would like to know is, when have these rules been last updated? I recall from one of the submissions, I think it's from the Prisons Commissioner report in 2013, that the Ministry of Justice at that time would have done some work on updating those rules, and that was supposed to go before Parliament in 2014. I'd like to know, was that done? Did it happen? Have these rules been updated? And I'm asking this in specific reference to the fact that there have been some declarations in 2015 and so with the so-called Mandela rules that look at how remandees should be treated and so on. When is the last time those rules have been updated?
Presently, those rules haven't been pronounced on the Parliament as yet. Those rules are still at the office of the AG.
So as a follow-up to that question, I've noticed that the rules that have been used and are still in use now are not very specific with respect to certain types of treatment. For example, the Mandela rules, they tend to spell out like ratios of prisoners to cell and ratios of prisoners to toilet facilities and so on, and to beds. That is not spelled out as distinctly in the prison rules that are presently in operation. The updated rules that are going to be enforced, do they go down to that level of specificity?
Based on my interaction with the committee or internal committee, I would say yes. We are still studying it. There's an ongoing process taking place right now in the prison in the small legal department that would impact on what goes back to the Attorney General office, and those are some of the issues that they will be looking at.
So then, are the rules, the recommendations for the changes in the rules, are they complete then? Or is that process still ongoing?
That process is still ongoing.
Okay, so it's a conversation happening between the legal of the prisons and the Attorney General's office, so it's not a complete process at this point in time. So you can't say it's at the AG's office right now, it's still ongoing.
Good morning again, Madam Chair. The rules had been prepared and were ready for coming to Parliament. However, because time had elapsed, the AG would have asked the prison to comment further, given that it's a dynamic environment that we're operating in. And for instance, we had issues to do with whether we would want to have the remanded inmates having a special uniform. Those are some of the updates that had to be taken on board, because the traditional rule and even the revised rule had been sort of silent with respect to remanded inmates. Again, for the obvious reasons, the convicted persons had been given, the original rule had a bias with respect to convicted persons, and the revised rule had continued in a sense with that, and of course issues to do with women and the treatment of women. So we felt at the legal department that there was a need to encompass all this, because these rules, once they pass, they would chart the course going forward. So it had been completed, but there were a request for additional updates, and we have been submitting those updates to the AG's office. That's the present position as far as the rules are concerned.
And my last question on this, those updates that are being considered, what impact have the declaration of the Mandela rules in 2015 had on those updates that are going forward?
They have been taken on board, Madam Chair. As I said, the whole issue of the uniforms for the remanded inmates is something that the Mandela rule speaks to. whether they should be remain in their normal clothing as far as possible, or whether if you're going forward with a uniform, it should be a uniform separate and apart from those of the convicted inmates. All of these issues have to be considered within the economic constraints, because we're talking about laundering and all these other niceties that come with providing a uniform for remanded persons. But I said it's a little more than that. Certainly the AG's office is in conversation. There's a standing committee that is looking at these new adjustments to add to what had already been processed to come to Parliament.
And is there a deadline by which, because obviously the situation is dynamic, there are going to be changes from time to time. Is there a deadline by which the prison service expects the discussion to end and the new rules to be decided upon to go to Parliament?
Under the direction of the AG with respect to the time frames and the limits. However, it has to be noted that the rules require as well some level of infrastructural changes. So I am told that the AG has a strategy with respect to that, and I wouldn't want to prejudice those strategies at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My first question is a very simple one. I understand the constraints under which you operate, but in the submissions received, there is evidence that in remand yard, overcrowding occurs. First question, a very simple one. You have more prisoners than you have beds. How do you manage that situation?
Morning. Nelson, Superintendent Remand. We'll be open to a total of 10 this morning. The remand was built, we have 714 beds. The remand was built to accommodate 600 inmates. So I would also like to say, well, along with the beds, we also operate with a system where we use mats too, where when the bed is not totally adequate.
So basically, in the night, every prisoner has somewhere soft to sleep. Are you giving the committee that assurance? It may not be a formal bed, it could be a piece of sponge or something?
Yes, sir.
Very well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back, because the committee, this inquiry is an examination into the human rights of the remandees at the remand prison. So I wanted to ask, the prison rules as presently constituted, what rights did they take into consideration? Is it just those rights that are guaranteed under the Constitution? Or do they also take into consideration, did they take into consideration some international charter of human rights, or what rights did the prison rules take into consideration when they were being drafted?
The fundamental rights as enshrined in the Constitution, those were the rights. And of course, we had, prior to the coming on board of the Mandela amendments, there was the United Nations minimum standard for the treatment that had existed for some time. So we had been using those as the standard. And of course, our own experiential considerations as a prison service in terms of what we feel should inform best practice and what our experience has taught us over time. So those would have gone into the drafting of these new rules.
So with respect to best practice, are you saying that you, the prison service, you have a charter of rights or some sort of charter that deals with the treatment of prisoners, remandees?
The prison service does not have a written charter of rights. As I said, over time, we would have relied on the Constitution and pronouncements by the courts. Several judicial decisions would have informed some of the practices that we undertake. But there is no written charter of rights per se that the prison is bound by or is attended by in terms of our actions.
With respect to all the inmates, is there some policy or document that specifies that the convicted inmates are treated separately from the remanded inmates?
The 1943 revised ordinance, that speaks to the separation between remanded inmates and convicted inmates. So, though that body of rule date back to 1838 and was revised in 1943, certainly it was perhaps quite forward-thinking, and there are many pronouncements with respect to the separation. But as I said, there has always been a bias in relation to the remanded inmates as opposed to the convicted inmates, and also feminine issues, because at the time it would perhaps not have been considered as vital as we now see it.
But do the remanded inmates, are they mixed with convicted inmates at any point in time?
It happens procedurally when the person goes to court on any particular day, especially if it's a Friday and the sentence is pronounced. The person is returned to the remand, but they are kept separated. There is a particular location, the central location, because they have to be processed to move from being a remanded person to a convicted person. So they have to come to Port of Spain for that process to take place. But whilst they are the remand for the very short time, especially if it happens on a Friday, the longest time that happens is until the weekend, where they transferred from that department to Port of Spain. However, whilst they're there, they are kept separate and apart from the normal remanded population who adjourn cases on 80 as the case may be.
One of the major issues raised with respect to human rights, and along with overcrowding, and along with that come a whole slew of human rights that may be infringed on that basis. Since the time of the report 2002-2013, what are the concrete or major things that have been done to deal with the issue of overcrowding at the remand yard?
Once again, good morning, Madam Chairperson. Based on the recommendations of the committee, several steps were taken to address those. The purchase of beds, 300 beds would have been undertaken, and 290 of those beds would have been installed. Those are all of the beds that could have fit in the space, the cells that we have, so they were all installed. The issue of a laundry was also constructed to allow the inmates to have their clothes washed. So we have installed 2 washers and 4 dryers to facilitate the washing of clothing. In addition to which, we also installed 23 stainless steel toilets throughout the facility, which would allow the inmates to use the toilets during the course of the day, of course not overnight, but during the course of the day, in some measure of comfort, as the case would have been. What we have also continued to do over time as relates to easing the troubles with the overcrowding is move the population. As the population goes up, we take those persons across to the maximum security prison. So that we, as far as it's possible, we try to keep the population at the remand no higher than 1,000 persons. In the past, it used to be almost 1,200. So we have been.
I'm sorry, if I could just clarify on that point. When you say when it gets too high, you take some to the maximum prison?
Maximum security prison, yes.
What does that mean? Because I know you're not mixing them, obviously.
No, we have, at the maximum security prison, we have remanded inmates here. So we continue to take inmates from the remand prison Golden Grove and take them across to the maximum security prison, as that facility has a greater capacity than the remand prison Golden Grove.
So to be clear, the remand prison in Golden Grove, when it becomes too overcrowded, how much, the capacity of that is how much?
600.
600. So when it gets to over 1,000 or so, you move
Yeah.
prisoners from there to the maximum security prison in Port of Spain.
No, at
Sorry.
Aruca also. Just to
Aruca.
advise, ma'am, the remanded inmates at Port of Spain prison, at the remand prison Golden Grove, and at the maximum security prison, for the most part. And we try to manage those populations in the best way that we can, given the space and the restrictions that we have with the infrastructure. So, as the situation, as the population increases, we move around the inmates in numbers to ensure that no one location is overly overcrowded or becomes unmanageable, as the case may be.
Are all the locations overcrowded? Do they all have greater than the capacity at this point in time?
With the exception of the maximum security prison, yes.
Okay. Okay, so just to be clear, one other measure is to manage the level of overcrowding by distributing the remandees in all the available locations.
Yes.
Okay. Did I get all of your initiatives to deal with overcrowding? Is that it?
No, well, as far as to deal with overcrowding, yes. The conditions, some of their improvements will speak to the conditions, actual conditions.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm taking from where our chairman left out with respect to the overcrowding. And I want to pose a question to you. Can you tell us when we would see an elimination of the use of pale? Because with overcrowding, we have challenges with hygiene and health issues. And could you tell the committee this morning if there is a plan afoot, or which would indicate to us a process for the total elimination of use of pale in the prisons?
There is a plan to improve that type of facility in terms of the toilet issue at the remand prison, where we basically would utilize, in our cluster of 3 cells, we utilize each cell in between 3 cells to put toilet facilities in that particular area. The document that would speaks into that is at the level, I think, of cabinet, where we are still seeking approval.
So just to clarify, there are plans to do that, so that will cater to them at night when the pale system is to be.
That would eradicate the pale system, and it would allow the use of toilets at night.
Okay.
I need some more clarification on that answer. Could you tell me, okay, if there's a plan afoot to eradicate pale, which means that, are you telling us that 100% of all the areas, in particular the remand yard, still use pale, or is it 70% or 50%? And tell me, at what point are you now in this whole process of eradication? Has something started? And can you tell me to the population, which we said is over 600, which is catering for 600, but over 600, could you tell me at what point you are at in that particular issue with regard to pale and use of pale?
Are we speaking of the remand prison, or?
I'm speaking of the remand prison.
That particular plan has been on the burner probably before 2013. Recently, it was resubmitted. My colleague here could take me up on that, and it is out of our hands as far as the whole idea of that situation is concerned. We would have done what we need to do in terms of sending for the things like estimate, and we are waiting on the go-ahead from up above in order to actually start this project.
I know that the Commissioner of Prisons has certain areas of responsibility in managing the affairs of the prison. Can you tell us under whose remit that falls? in respect of managing the prison, in respect of expending funding, usage of funding, and directing to the ministry what areas of funding are necessary and urgent. Can you tell us who determines that?
The particular facility we are speaking about, the commissioner doesn't have capacity to approve a situation like that. Commissioner has could approve up to $1 million. $450, sorry. $1,000, sorry. The project we are speaking about would cost something like, I think, $55 million in order to eradicate the whole use of peel.
And just to alert everyone who is here that online we are getting quite a number of questions, and one of these questions really center around the same thing we're discussing right now, and they are speaking about female prisoners and the use of the peel, especially at certain times, being very unhygienic. And so that information coming forward about the plan to eradicate that, and the fact that there's a detailed submission awaiting approval, I think would be very heartening to those who are asking those questions. I want to place one question that moves a little bit away from that, but speaks to, again, the human rights of the remandees, that deals with renewal of national documents, driver's permit, passport, etc. And the person is asking if a social worker is assigned to prisoners, or I guess it's to remandees at this point, to deal with that whole issue of renewal of national documents. And what happens when somebody's on remand for more than 5 years and their documents expire? What is put in place, or if anything is put in place, to assist remandees in this regard?
Some time ago, we had an issue regarding a situation like that, and basically what would have happened, we would have looked at the situation case by case. But presently, we have a policy that's supposed to be coming into effect shortly that would deal with in entirety the whole issue of that sort of arrangement for remanded prisoners.
So just to clarify, at this point in time, there's nothing put in place to deal with that type of situation?
Yes, there's a plan that would have come out of our last situation.
There's a plan?
There's a plan now to deal with that.
Okay, but it has not been implemented?
Well, it hasn't been implemented.
All right, so there's a system then?
There is a system.
So at this point, if remandees have those needs, there is some measure of redress to deal with that?
Yes, there is some measure of redress, and one of the starting point is through the welfare officers or the social workers in the prison system.
Okay, thank you.
A clarification on that. Someone has a passport expired and he needs to get it renewed. While he's on remand, you are saying that it is currently done by the use of social workers in the remand prison, the renewal of passports at this time.
There is a request system. When situation like that comes up, the request would be normally forwarded to the welfare officer, who goes about the whole investigation of the process and make their recommendations, and the process would continue from there.
Okay, and you're aware that this has resulted in somebody being able to deal with their situations in this way?
Yes, it has.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Remand Yard Prison has at present 203 functional cells. The center was built to accommodate 600 inmates. How many cells are functioning at present?
Basically, I could say that all the cells would be functional at present. Sometimes we would have minor hiccups with a little lock from here to there, but as for functionality, you could basically say that all the cells are functional.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. The question I want to pose is this. Remandees have not yet been convicted of any crime. They are simply awaiting trial. And I'd like to know whether they have different visitation rights from the regular incarcerated inmates. Are their families able to visit them more often? Do they get to see their children? If so, what are the facilities available? And is it that the prison currently, the authorities, do try to ensure that the existing family connection of the remandee is, as far as is practicable, maintained?
The inmates at the remand prison have a different visit arrangement than convicted prisoners. Generally, their family visit, twice per week of 15 minutes duration. That does not take into consideration their legal visit. Legal visits could be any amount.
Does that include the visit of their children?
There is another policy in place that deals with visit by children.
Could you elaborate on what that policy is?
The policy basically takes into account persons who would have been in the system over a year. They would normally make a request to visit with their family.
Okay. And one final question, Madam Chair. There are inmates in remand over a year. They are awaiting trial. Could you give me an indication of the minimum time one can expect in Trinidad and Tobago to remain in remand and the maximum time, from your experience? What is the shortest period of time have you seen an inmate remain in remand before he is either exonerated or incarcerated? And what's the maximum time you have seen someone spend in remand in Trinidad and Tobago?
It could be from a day, because there's a system of bail where people come there and they got bail.
To an upper limit of how long?
I would have seen people there over 14 years.
You have seen people over 14 years in remand?
Yes, I would.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. In my respectful and humble view, in terms of improving the conditions at the remand center, the easiest thing is, right now, is to ensure that a minimal amount of remandees are kept on remand. Those for offenses arrested and charged that are unbailable. I saw a recommendation made that a new remand center should be built, and I'll ask you to comment on that. But the Inspector of Prisons report made a recommendation that the system of bail, the access to bail, be improved for bailable offenses. Because I'm seeing some statistics here that 60% of your inmate population are remandees, and the majority of that remandee population are on remand for bailable offenses. So it appears as there is some problem with the access to bail. Can I have your opinion on where a system of bail is improved, the access to bail is improved, what impact would that have on your remand population? What impact would that have on your management of the remand population?
Any system like that implemented would automatically impact on the population of the remand prison. It says that there would, other things being equal, there'd be a reduction in persons being held at the remand prison. Then in the general management of prisoners, particularly where we have issues with gangs and this sort of stuff, it would give us basically the capacity to manage, risk and needs and situation regarding prisoners. We help us to manage issues regarding interaction or accidental interaction of gangs. It would allow us to greater utility as far as staff is concerned. There's some of the basic things I would see there. And probably it would allow us now to move around inmates, even at that section, to to effect a greater level of repairs to the infrastructure. This is what I see basically from the reduction in persons there.
And can I have a comment on the proposal to construct a new remand center?
Member, I just wanted to mention that point. There is actually a proposal that has been agreed to for the construction of a new remand prison. Land has already been identified for the construction of the facility. UDECOT has been engaged to manage that project. In fact, UDECOT is currently in conversation with the Ministry of National Security to finalize a contract on that. We had actually hoped to start that project this year, but because of the financial constraint within which we had to operate, we had to prioritize a little differently. And so we are actually aiming to start that project in the new fiscal period. In the interim, though, we had to prioritize some of the other projects. And one of the projects that we've actually prioritized this year is the electronic monitoring system, which we feel, based on one of the questions asked there just now, we feel would also be able to, once we've implemented that, would also have a positive impact on the population in the Remand Yard Prison. This is where an electronic gadget is fastened to inmates and stuff, and they could be actually released and be monitored, not necessarily be locked up in a prison cell. So that's one of the projects that we've actually prioritized. We're hoping to have that project completed and have it on stream by the end of the current fiscal period. But certainly with respect to the new remand prison, we should see that, in fact, we're actually hoping still that we could be able to have an agreement with UDECOT in place to have the preliminary designs begin before the end of the current fiscal period.
Just one other unrelated question. Let's imagine someone is arrested for some non-violent possession of some marijuana or something. They're arrested on a Friday night and they go to jail. On Monday, they appear before a magistrate, and the magistrate grants bail, but they're unable to meet the conditions of bail, so they're sent up on remand. That has a drastic effect on that person's family life. If that person is employed, he is just absent from his place of employment. But of course, he is not yet convicted, and he is presumed innocent until so convicted. Do you have any programs at the prison, at the remand center, that offers some sort of counseling to these persons who are just uprooted and placed in remand in a very, very difficult place, a very difficult situation?
If I could just answer the question first of all from the narrow point in terms of what you speak about the person coming in on a Friday. On a Saturday morning, we have officers who would interview the inmate, generally about particulars pertaining to his warrant. And subsequently, we have welfare officers who come in on a Saturday for that particular purpose in terms of meeting and greeting the prisoner, in terms of dealing with issues that hedges around his family outside. And most of our welfare officers, if not all of our welfare officers, are university graduate social workers who possess that necessary skill in counseling that deals with immediate issues like that. Further down the road, if the person would stay there a particular length of time, there's available counseling. We have on the staff psychologists, and there is also referral system in terms of getting these people external assistance in that regard. Additionally, if you want to look at development programs, notwithstanding the fact that the person is unconvicted, we have a lot of a fair amount of development programs to help people development. Additionally to that, we have partnership with faith-based organizations who come in and normally would meet and have congregational services and probably do one-on-one faith-based and faith-related issues that would help deal with issues that individual persons might have. So generally, at the remand prison, notwithstanding the amount of persons we have to deal with, there are some facilities there that would actually help persons through situations like this.
Madam President, a follow-up is not my substantive question, but a follow-up from Member Mitchell. And the follow-up is this, and it will bring in Mr. Roger of Vision on a Mission. I'm looking at prisoners who may be first-time offenders and who would really be very traumatized at being uprooted and being placed in the remand system. And I'm just wondering, in the absence of social workers whom you may have to call, whether you have a system in place where prisoners themselves who have been in the system for a while and who can act as mentors for these younger ones can be teamed with them, so that in the absence of the social workers, some of the individuals who will find their way into Vision on a Mission subsequently, the senior ones, those who are hopefully going to leave, can act as the mentors within the prison system to provide a kind of counseling and a guidance to the younger ones, so that the prison experience will not be as horrific and as traumatizing as I suspect it could be if someone is just uprooted, a first-time offender.
I'm trying to answer the question, but I would want to know whether or not if it specifically, the question will generally deals with general prison or remand prison, because remand prison, we need to be a little bit guarded in terms of that.
A remand prison, because you indicated that there are some people in remand who can be there for up to 14 years. There are people in there who are in remand for quite a while. I am sure many of them would have tremendous experience in being in remand. And have you been able to screen any of them for aptitude who would work with other prisoners as opposed to relying solely on social workers on the outside, so that it's senior prisoner helping out junior prisoner? Do you have such a system that you can use so that the actual experience for the newcomer will not be as worrying or troublesome as I suspect it may be?
Yes, to a very limited extent.
And maybe I could direct a follow-up to Mr. Roger on that.
I would want to say also, right, given the remand situation, it's difficult to have a wholesale project like that. But I would want to tell you, we have had prisoners in the remand prison, even recently, who would have been in other programs. We would have had a prisoner, maybe over the last year, who would have graduated, self-taught and assisted by officers there. I think would have graduated at like something about 12 CXC passes, and eventually would have gotten convicted. People like him would normally, not that we have a direct program like that, but people like him would normally encourage others in this regard. And we have educational classes and other classes there that facilitate that sort of coming together of persons of that nature. At the general level, we have a program, a specific mentoring sort of program in maximum security prison.
Case in point, an 18-year-old young man has been accused of having marijuana in his possession. He is taken before the courts, he can't get bail, he is brought before you. This is his first time experience. How do you go about integrating him into the prison, into the remand system? Do you select certain prisoners or certain cells that he can go to, knowing that, well, these prisoners are going to be a little more caring to this individual as opposed to individuals who may be violent to this person and so on?
Yes, we do.
Sorry. Oh, you want to respond to this?
I want
issue?
Mr. Husbands to respond because he deals with those type of things. Yes, yes, Warden.
Thank you, Chair. I have sat, I have listened, and I know the focus is on the prison. But I'll come to your question just now, but I am hearing very little in terms of how can we decongest the court, right, to help to decongest the prison.
If I may, I just want to be very specific. There's another Joint Select Committee that deals with the legal system and so. So we are very specific in our focus dealing with the human rights of the remandees.
Yes.
So if you could just confine it to that.
And to confine it, you cannot separate it. It's just my view, Madam Chair. Because you see, if you're talking about human rights begin from arrest into the court, right? That filters into the prison. Right? And there might be, Mr. Mitchell, I think he struck a very important chord. If we're talking about human rights, equality, and diversity, there must be a particular charter, right? That all the agencies who form criminal justice system must be part of and become part of the what they call the criminal justice system, human rights management system. For me, that is key. To come to Dr. Danasar's position. Well, that might be good. It's something that they call inmate-run programs. But you got to be very careful in that that person or inmate must be trained. That person, that inmate, must be that kind of person who understands human behavior. That individual must be an epitome of good behavior, good character, and the like. And again, you have to look out for manipulation. Those are very important things. And I'm saying two things that I know that operates in the prison. I know my colleague probably slipped him. There's something that they call a council of prison chaplains and ministers who have that kind of responsibility to counsel, right? To take control of particularly young ones, and they actually can try to manage cases like the young person you're talking about. Again, more than that, if we're talking in terms of young persons, the 18-year-old should not be in our remand in the adult prison at all. Right? So it speaks to the whole aspect in terms of human rights, diversity, and equality. I don't know if that put a spin on the whole aspect in terms of human rights, diversity, and equality.
Certainly. Thank you. Let me ask a question. If there's someone, a remandee, who is concerned that his or her human rights are being infringed, is there any system in place for them to report that and get any measure of redress that is within the prison system itself?
There is a request and complaint system that goes from the supervisor and could go all the way to the president if that's the situation.
And could I ask for some indication of how many complaints are received, whether or not, I know that, is it the supervisor of the prisons that they have to report to? The remandee has to report to whom?
The reports would normally take the form of a report to the prison supervisor the shift supervisor who, if something happens there and then, the report would go to the supervisor. And it probably would be channeled all the way up if some level of redress isn't gained at that particular low level. And it could reach to the point where inmates would be given letters to write the lawyer, probably to write the Minister of National Security, the Ombudsman, and it could go all the way to the President's office.
And how many reports are received, say, within the last year? And what is the success rate then? For example, so you say it can go. How many of them do get there? Because I could envisage that a remandee may feel that they open themselves up to maybe victimization or that kind of thing. How many reports actually do reach to a point where they are dealt with and some redress, some measure of redress is given to the remandee?
In terms of numbers, that it'll be very difficult to say exactly how many would have come through. You would appreciate that many of those requests are handled at the supervisor level. For if inmate has a challenge, he may be advised that he may need to write the ombudsman to treat with the issue. He may need to write his representative, his attorney, the Minister of National Security. It depends on what the problem is. If it is something that can be treated within the prison environment, of course, we would tend to treat with the problem. If the supervisor can't handle it, then he takes it to the superintendent, who then addresses the concerns of the inmate. If, however, again at that level, there's something that the superintendent can't handle, then it may reach all the way up to the commissioner for the commissioner's intervention in treating the problem. We don't normally have many of those type issues reaching the commissioner, because most of the issues can be addressed at the supervisor or the superintendent level, except those issues that need to be taken outside, where he's advised by the court, the attorney, the ombudsman, as the case may be. We do get many returns from the ombudsman, and some of the matters are investigated and reported back to the ombudsman as required.
But are you satisfied that that system allows a free and fair flow of concerns from the remandees to those who need to deal with the system? Because it's almost as though they're going to the persons who are in charge of instituting the system to make that complaint. Is there no facility that allows them to deal with somebody who is outside of the system and therefore can look a little more impartially at what is happening?
The ombudsman is one of the most important facility, or the inspector of prisons, or the prison inspectorate that hopefully will be coming on stream at any time soon.
And how is that facilitated? How easy is it for someone who believes that their rights are being infringed to get an appointment with the ombudsman? How does the prison facilitate that, or do they not facilitate it?
We have a request system. Just step back, a person could request to see their attorney. In the case of problems, complaints, they could request to see an attorney appointed by the state through the legal aid system. With regards to the ombudsman, they are permitted and allowed to write letter which go uncensored to the office of the ombudsman. So they are allowed to seal their letters, and we just dispatch the letters. Normally, when the response comes from the ombudsman, they come in the form of envelopes attached to a forwarding form. All we do is just facilitate the dispatch of those responses from the ombudsman to the particular inmate.
And so you are clear that that facility is afforded to every remandee, and that they are able to make those complaints or state their concerns in a free and fair manner, and they can be dealt with.
I believe so.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for my more substantive questions, and a few of them. First, are remandees able to see this particular program, the Parliament channel in Remand Yard, and what is happening? Second, so do they have facilities where they can look at national television, at least during the course of the day? And second, the general population has certain ailments, diabetes, hypertension, and I'd imagine the remand population also. If there are remandees with these medical conditions and the infirmary is not able to supply them with the necessary pharmaceuticals, is it that the family members are permitted to bring the diabetes, hypertension, cholesterol drugs to them? Or is it that that's not permitted? And the third is, many of us like nice things to eat. What about a remandee who would like a box of chicken and chips? Would a family member be able to bring that to him or her during the 15-minute period? So the three questions are there facilities to look at what is happening in the national community? Because we do want to reintegrate them back in the system, as Vision on a Mission has indicated, and we need for them to know what goes on in Parliament and the Parliament channel. Do they have access to medications outside? And can family members bring things for them to eat that they may not normally get in the prison?
The present physical configuration of the remand prison makes it almost impossible to have television sets installed that inmates could access.
But do you think it would be beneficial for the remandees to at least be able to see some television during the day, to know what is happening in the rest of the world, so that when they are released back into society, it's not as if They are coming into a completely strange new environment. They are already aware. How difficult will it be to have a couple of TV stations, TVs around the remand yard so that people can see what is happening? Is that extremely complex?
There are television sets, I believe, in the exercise area that remand prisoners are during the time that they have recreation.
Since medications and...
Medication, where the system cannot facilitate, they are permitted to have their relatives bring the medication to them. Okay. And regarding the Kentucky Fried Chicken, there's a the same thing. The issue there has to do with the security of the institution having these things and the possible problems that we could have if those food materials are tainted, and we'd find ourselves having to deal with a lot of liability in that regard. So we basically don't allow that.
Okay, but could it be that since these places deliver, that they can actually deliver it on behalf of the prisoners and the family members can collect and say, I bought a box of chicken and chips for you? So you didn't buy it yourself and you could put things in there. KFC or whatever it is delivers. Do you think such a system can work? You see, I'm looking at the basic rights of a remandee. I would like, as far as is practicable, for the remandee not to be denied what he normally will have on the outside, as long as it conforms with safety and security standards. And some of those things, I think, are things which, they may be small, but they may make the kind of difference we want to make to the remandee, so that his integration back into society and his level of anger can somehow be controlled. Especially if an innocent man is incarcerated, I'd imagine he'd be very annoyed. I just would like to, and that can't be good for the society. So some of these small things I'm looking at, I am hoping that your prison administrators will be looking at to see if there are things which could be done to mitigate the hardship that they inevitably suffer while incarcerated.
Certainly, we are on the same page as far as that is concerned, Dr. Mahabir. But I just wanted to go back to the issue of the food. We have had serious security challenges with the issue of the food. Historically, we had a practice in place that the remand prisoner could have food from the outside. It had to be approved by the commissioner because you didn't want to have a situation where the person would be bringing in food for 2 days of the week, and then for the other 2 they are not able to. So it had to be sure that they could consistently supply the food. And that arrangement was working fine. Then we had a security threat, where persons who know certain people bringing that food could try to get to it and taint it, as the commissioner spoke to. And that then becomes a critical liability issue. And also, if the person falls sick from eating food from the outside, in circumstances where the duty of care lies with the commissioner, there is a legal possible avenues there as well. So it's not something that we against, but certainly the limitations of the resources speak to that issue. But we agree with you totally, and the commissioner, to the extent of his discretion, has been using that discretion to apply initiatives. They spoke earlier about the child visits. We have been having child visits once it's properly screened, because the child is the welfare of the child is the critical issue when we speak to child visits. So once the welfare do the background check and they satisfy that the child is not negatively impacted and it will conduce to a better situation for the inmates, then after those checks are done, that visit is allowed. And any other initiatives, sporting initiatives, bringing in teams from outside to play against the remand, every cultural program, a slew of initiatives within our remit to allow for that recognition, that dubious interval between trial and commitment.
Since you're on that topic, I just want to get a little more understanding of what is done, as you mentioned, sporting and so on. I want to understand a little bit more about what is done for the remandee, what programs are in place and so on. I know the question about looking at the news, looking at national events and so on. Are they afforded to have access to the newspapers and so on? Are there, what is done to use their time, seeing that they're in this period, this dubious period between conviction and incarceration? What are the programs in place for remandees that can mitigate against the feelings of, stress, frustration, and anger while they are incarcerated?
We are somewhat limited in terms of physical facilities to implement the type of programs we want. But just to tell you, we have CSEC programs, including English, mathematics, social studies, English grammar and composition, social studies and science. We have ALTA programs. Level 1 and level 2, we have school living. They are inmates of this system exposed to YTEP training. There, we have also religious organizations, including the Raj Yoga Center. We have spiritual Baptists comes in and they do their stuff. We have the Muslim Jummah service. We have Seventh-day Adventist services, Jehovah's Witnesses, Catholic. We have also life skills training. In the area of sporting, we have cricket, football, basketball, table tennis, and even in the limited area that the exercise yard is. I don't know for how much any of the persons on the panel would have been close to the prison. There's a nice yard where we will run competitions, football competitions and ball cricket competitions in that exercise area. So we allow them that facility.
Do these things happen at all the facilities, all the remand facilities?
Yes, they do. Because right now, even at Port of Spain, where we have remanded prisoners, I think we just winding up on a cricket competition there at Port of Spain prison.
And maybe I can direct a question to Vision and Mission. You deal with people who come out of prison. But what I'm asking is, do you also deal with persons who have spent extended times on remand, and do they display the same types of anger and frustration and face the same types of challenges as people who have come out of incarceration, actually having been sentenced? So basically what I'm asking is, does a long time on remand affect you in the same way as a time in prison would? Are the challenges the same? And so on, because we're hearing that yes, there are things in place to assist them while they're on remand, but what happens when someone spends a long time on remand and is now to be reintegrated into society? What are their challenges?
Well, from our experience, we have had very few long-term remandees coming to seek our services. We find more those who have been convicted, but those who have been on remand, when they come to us, they come with a lot of anxiety, right? They come with a lot of depression, a lot of frustration. And here the whole aspect in terms of human rights, in terms of work, in terms of housing, in terms of getting that sort of sense that they have that kind of equal life chances. And what is required when they come to us is how can we more or less have them stabilized to understand the road, what are the, we call them the navigational issues, to start to get back on their feet, to start to live independently. And it's not an easy thing. It takes about, particularly if they remain very long, it takes about 3 years for an ex-offender, whether convicted or remanded, to start to re-socialize and start to get back on his feet, and it requires care, support, surveillance, and supervision in terms of, do they have the skill if they're looking for work? So many of them come and they're looking for work, but are they functional, right? Do they understand the responsibilities? Have they kept up to the whole standard in terms of ITC and the like? Well, I know the prison now, you're getting a lot of certification. That was a challenge, but now some of them coming out with certification. But some of them don't understand the whole aspect in terms of OSHA, the whole aspect in terms of the work conduct, the ethics. And those are some of the issues that must be addressed. But the remandees, but those are more difficult, because in that they still have that issue of whether they will be convicted or not still on their shoulders. Some of them are out on if they come out and they're on bail, some of them are still thinking into how are they going to pay back the bailer or the person who put a bail for them. And there's the whole aspect in terms of work. And this is why Vision and Mission is trying to get into agriculture, so that you have that kind of, those people who come out and cannot find jobs can get some kind of meaningful, immediate kind of employment. But that cannot happen in a vacuum, because yes, they may want work, but if they haven't stabilized in terms of the character, in terms of obedience, in terms of understanding the adherence to law, order, morality, and justice, which are issues must be addressed in terms of recognition therapy. Some people laugh at it, but you have to teach them how the decisions have impacted on them and what are the deficits and how they can reevaluate their decisions and how we can actually teach them how to start to function as a law-abiding citizens, and that requires things like respect, obedience, understanding what citizenship is all about. So the whole question in terms of remand, right, is what we need to call a pre-trial pre-release in remand to address all those issues that I'm talking about. And that has nothing to do with after they have convicted. From the time that they come in, we must develop what we call in corrections now pre-trial release, in terms of preparing them in terms of what are the challenges, even if they are staying here for a while, what are the challenges while they're there, in terms of how they can be stabilized, how they deal with the frustration, how they deal with substance abuse, because that is a big thing, mental issues, and all these things speak to a whole question in terms of a human rights management approach to prisons. And that is the whole concept in terms of why Vision Mission has been more or less advocating for pre-trial, pre-release. Yes, we do pre-release for the convicted, but there must be that same kind of process for people on remand, even more so because they don't have a particular date. And we're seeing it may not happen overnight, probably in the next 2 or 3 years. I hope it will, but I'm not too optimistic. So we must get into the remand and we actually try to prepare those persons in terms of how they cope with the eventuality, in terms that they may not be coming out in a very quick time. Yes, that may be sounding sort of contradictory if we're talking about human rights, right? The fact that we have been them there so long, for me that constitutes cruel and unusual punishment, and it's also contrary to the old charter in terms of human rights. And all these issues have to be explained so the inmates can understand and develop that desire and the need and the reason to know why they need to try to conform and develop a whole concept in terms of cognitive theory, in terms of how they think through things and how they rationalize things. That is the only way we're going to try to get them to understand, and not really to accept, but understand the reason for the long delays in prison. And these are the things, when the remand come to us, these are the things we have to deal with as well as the convicted persons.
Minister Mitchell?
Oh, sorry. You have to press.
Yeah. Right.
You wanted to add something?
Yeah, what was I saying, boy? No, I'll get back to it, yes. Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. I'm still on the constitutional rights, respect for private and family life. Let me ask you a slightly controversial question. Having regard to that right, is that the reason why the remandees have unlimited access to cell phones and cell phone calls and credit and so on at the remand prison? Or is it just an unlawful illegal trade? Is it some relaxed position by the prison why the remandees are allowed to have these cell phones and engage in cell phone calls to the outside?
It is absolutely not a relaxed position. It is the law, and cell phones are prohibited under the laws, and every opportunity we conduct searches to find where these phones are and to take them out of the jurisdiction. Because I hope, certainly as far as the prison service is concerned, to protect society as a fundamental role in the criminal justice system, having any inmate with access to phones, separate and apart from the consideration of the contact with the family, can also lead to an infringement of the rights of other citizens if those phones are used for nefarious purposes. So the prison's position is clear and unambiguous that a prisoner ought not to have a cell phone, and we take all action that we can to eliminate this situation. That is certainly against the prison rules.
Okay. So you said prisoner, but we're talking about remandees, just remandees. So thank you for that. But tell me, what access to telephone calls do these remandees have? You said they have visits to a maximum of twice per week for 15 minutes. What access do they have to cell phone calls, and how are those monitored, and how often, how long can a phone call be, etc.?
When we have had the installation 2 years ago of technical capacity to jam calls, the cell phone calls, because we recognize the difficulty in finding the phones. Before this was instituted, a phone system was implemented across all the remand yard, including the high security divisions, where inmates can access phone calls through a normal regulated line that doesn't require the use of prohibited cell phones. So there is a system in place. The inmate makes the request. There is times that they can get to the phone. The family would pay the monies to put on the card, and they're allowed to make phone calls in relation to what are some of the pressing needs. We took care to ensure this was installed before the jammers were fully institutionalized, because some people had been making the case that the cell phones were the only contact with the family. And again, it wasn't a blanket security approach, but certainly that system is in place and working to the extent, of course, that persons believe that some calls may, perhaps they wouldn't want to put certain information on such a line. Then, of course, some people have not been using it. But it is there for any inmate who so desires its use.
Okay, last question. With respect to the remand yard, is there a system in place? And I'm on the right that individuals are not to be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. Is there a system where the more dangerous offenders, the more dangerous remandees, or the gang members, etc., are they separated from the non-violent remandees? The remandees who are charged for non-violent offenses. Is there a system of separation, or do everybody mix? Because not only am I concerned about the incidences of violence, the gang members preying upon the others, but there is a general sentiment in society that the remand yard is a criminal manufacturing facility. So is there a
I would say yes, but I would also want to say that there are two issues that basically would impact on that decision on what we do. And it has to do, one, with the level of information coming to us regarding persons of that nature coming to us. And the other at the other end, it has to do with the physical capacity to deal with that in that regard. This is something that we understand and appreciate. The whole idea of classification is critical in us managing the lives of prisoners there, in terms of being able to mitigate a certain level of risk to the society, to the staff, to other inmates, and even to the persons themselves. And this is critical, but the whole idea of flow of information to somehow circumscribes us, and physical capacity. What I could say, given this first situation, I know somewhere in the document they speak about intelligence unit. Without wanting to say much, but I know we would have initiated some efforts in terms of actually dealing with that particular situation that would help inform us and our decisions in terms of persons who come into us who are security threat, persons who are related to gangs and have different affiliations in areas where they could bring to us, that whole violent content and impact negatively the system. So yes.
Just lastly, and more of a comment, I want to commend all of you here present. I think that you all are doing a tremendous job having regard to the circumstances that you all face every day. But of course, my position is that in the short term, we can improve the human rights of remandees by getting them out of there. Thank you.
Could I make a further statement, please? Just to state also what we have been doing, what we would have done recently, we would have sat down together as members of the Executive and the Vigo Prison Service, and we would have, because what happens here, we cannot turn a blind eye to it. It affects all of us. We would have come together and author a document in terms of more efficient and effective use of the physical space we have. And we would have done a document that relates to the use of the maximum security prison in terms of housing some additional remanded inmates who are there for a long period. That said, we would have, some years ago, a security enclosure would have been established. We still haven't had full use of that, but the document that we have sent to the ministry would speak into that, because basically when you look at the whole issue of remanded prisoners, they ought to be allowed opportunity to work physical and get involved in actual programs that are outside of the normal minimum areas if they choose to. And we are hoping that that document we would have sent to the ministry would have been in the near future sit down and speak to probably the minister, the PS, and persons who are technical in the ministry in terms of how we could facilitate that. One of the issues that would help us deal with that situation is we have some ongoing repairs and at the maximum security prison that we would adjust the inmate population to suit that situation that we're trying to represent to the ministry. If that comes on stream, we'd be able to more adequately deal with these whole issues that surround the remanded inmate population in our charge.
Minister Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. At the Remand Yard Prison, what is the ratio of prison officers to remandees?
At the remand presently, there is a total of 302 officers assigned to the remand. Out of those, we have like 54 on non-active duty. But I'm going straight to the point. The batches, A, B, and C, we are a three-batch system that actually see about the inmates on a rotational basis. A batch would have an average of about 70 officers, with about 15 of those working in high duty. So basically, with our total being at about an average of 1,000, we basically will have like about 55 officers actually taking, that will actually be seen about the day-to-day, like bathing, feeding, and caring for the inmates on a daily basis.
Okay, so that's the ideal figure. With the ratio with prisoners to... Well, the figure that I have is 6-to-1.
That is the
ideal figure?
That is the ideal figure as it stands presently, sir.
All right. Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
A follow-up on that. I can imagine that in the prison system, a lot of work has to be done to look after the prisoners, and that there is that ratio of staff to inmates. Do you have the inmates themselves assist with respect to the various tasks in relation to their well-being, such as assist with the preparation of meals, the doing of the dishes, the laundry on their clothes, the general maintenance of their cells? Do you have a program where the inmates themselves do the bulk of that work to assist the bona fide staff members?
With regard the remanded inmate population, the only area that they would not be engaged in is preparing meals.
Thank you very much.
If I may, now we're coming down to the end, so I want to just focus on some of the concrete things. There are a number of recommendations made in all of the different reports. Has a strategic plan for the prison, whether it is a prison or the remand yard, Has a strategic plan been formulated based on all of those recommendations? Has it been, or is it being formulated? Who is in charge of producing that plan? Who is in charge of monitoring the progress of the implementation of that plan based on the recommendations made for improvement, specifically dealing now with Remand Yard? What is it, because I'm noting the document that Mr. Duke would have referred to, right, with respect to the one that you submitted for review by National Security. Does that constitute a strategic plan, or is there one in the making? Who is implementing and who's looking at the progress of implementation?
The plan that Mr. Duke spoke to is actually a strategic plan for treatment of the remanded inmates in our care. That plan is being driven by the Deputy Commissioner of Prisons at this time. At this point in time, we are awaiting some level of approval from the ministry as to its implementation. The plan comes with several key success factors that should be in place to make it happen, and that would, a lot of it depends on the support of the ministry to make some of these things happen. So there must be some concurrence from the minister and the ministry as relates to the strategic plan, but once implemented, we believe it will have the effect or the impact of greatly addressing the concerns, the human rights concerns of those remanded inmates within our.
Could you give us an idea of when this plan was submitted?
The plan left the Commissioner office, according to him, about 3 weeks ago.
I want to go back to the human rights of the remandee. One of the basic principles afforded by the Constitution is freedom of employment. And when a person is remanded in custody, it is also said that a person who is in remand yard is innocent until proven guilty. As a matter of fact, he's awaiting trial. But what happens is that when a person is in custody in remand yard, he loses his terms of employment, he loses his employment capacity, and he or she loses the capacity to take care of his family. Can you say whether the Prisons Authority or your welfare department has a program in place to work along with the families, which could be young children and unemployed mothers, or reverse? Could you tell us whether you engage in that type of activity, and even after that person goes to court and is incapacitated, or his matter is determined, he has problems in re-engaging his terms of employment with his employer. Can you tell me the role played by the Prison Welfare Department in all of this?
It's a little bit on the tricky side in terms of the welfare officers, as far as possible, try to act as that liaison between the employee and the employer. In many cases, especially some of those referred to earlier on, when the person is only there for a short time and may have access bail, find the welfare officer would normally get in touch with the employer and advise the employer the person is incarcerated and so on. And many times we would supply documents to the employers on behalf of the employee, let them know that they were incarcerated. In addition to which, part of the social programs allows for the families of these incarcerated persons to apply for some level of welfare assistance, social assistance. They fill out the forms, and the children especially do get some sort of grants to treat with their needs while the persons are incarcerated. The welfare officers continue to play that role even though the person becomes incarcerated. The inmate usually makes a request to see the welfare officer, and the welfare officer would treat with most of those needs, especially, again, as on discharge, you will get letters from the prison indicated the period of incarceration, what sort of programs they may have been involved in, and so on, that goes back to the employer. So the work of the welfare officer involves doing that as well.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Again, a very simple matter I would like to address. And the reasons I'm raising them is that I think they are implementable in the very short term. And while I understand that it may be difficult to have televisions available to the remandees, I have not visited the facility, so I don't know your layout. I'm just wondering whether you have newspapers delivered on a daily basis, so that at least I'd imagine newspapers don't pose any security threats or risks. Do you have an adequate amount of newspapers available so that the remandees can be up to date with current events? That's one question. The second, I want to return to the issue of medication and diet, because a submission from the Ombudsman indicated to the committee that there were complaints from remandees that they did not receive their medications and or their dietary requirements. And with respect to medications, I'd like to know what is the process for actually administering the medication to the remandee? Is it one of your staff member who does it? Is it that it's given to him on a weekly basis? I don't know. But if there are complaints that medications were not received, I'd imagine that there may have been some systemic problem with the medications not being available or delivered. And second, with respect to dietary requirements, I'd imagine there would have been requirements based on someone's religion and or based upon his ailment. You don't want a particular type of diet for a diabetic not to be given to him. So I'm wondering about the newspaper delivery. And second, the complaints that the Ombudsman Office sent to us about medications and food. How prevalent are these complaints? And when these complaints are made within the remand system, who really looks into the veracity, the truthfulness of the complaints to ensure that they are not prolonged? I thought I was very clear. It's a very clear question. I wasn't convoluted at all.
If I could probably start with the newspaper. Yeah. Unconvicted persons are allowed access to paper brought into them by their relatives and friends.
Okay, but not from the prison system.
The prisons also, at least we cannot supply 1,000 newspapers to the system, but we allow a certain amount of newspaper, probably given the amount of persons who have to read. They might be reading maybe little stale news, but the prison purchases paper, acquire paper for the general.
Right, and that's available in the library, so you have newspapers together with books and other facilities?
Yes, we would have erected a fairly decent library facility in the cramped area at the remand prison, Golden Grove, and persons access newspaper from that point on.
And with respect to the problem with medications, because I think that's an important issue, someone who is hypertensive or who needs cholesterol arresting drugs should have it on a daily basis. We have gotten complaints that is sometimes the system breaks down.
For persons to get medication, notwithstanding the fact that they would have come in prison with a particular situation, they would have to be channeled to the doctor. The prison system provide medication for all inmates. Where we encounter problems regarding medication, the privilege is there for the inmate's family to collect the prescription, purchase the medication, and bring it back to us. What we try not to allow is the fact that you would have your medication wholesale. Normally, there's infirmary, what we call infirmary, where we have trained personnel. We refer to them as infirmary officers. Those are trained nurses who they would go to, and their medication, prescribed medication administered.
Yes.
And what does it do?
And the dietary requirements, we were told that sometimes it is not complied with, either for health or the health or religious reasons. How does that problem arise?
Sometimes we had problem with the diet. Subsequently, I think in maybe 2011, we developed a diet plan based on some complaints we would have had. And the diet plan, I have a copy here, basically seeks to deal with issues surrounding health, religion, and other factors. In January this year, we made an attempt to upgrade the diet plan. We would have had our personnel from the ARIMA I think borough health facility come in and look at our plan. Presently we are waiting an update in terms of that plan for the inmates. But we still have a DART plan in use that I have it here. Basically, it spells out the general and necessary requirement for that would adequately take care of what we might consider a balanced diet for inmates.
Okay, and therefore you can give the committee the assurance that on a daily basis, as per the recommendation of the dietitian, the range of meals required by the prison, the remand prison population is in general going to be distributed, save and except in certain situations where you may not find certain materials, but that in general, maybe 95% of the times, the dietary requirements are complied with.
Yes, in addition to that, sometimes, for instance, if an inmate has a particular situation, he would go by see the doctor, and information would be generated, and it would cause something to happen at the level of purchasing, where the necessary material will be bought towards dealing with particular diet like that. For instance, diabetic and this sort of stuff.
Yes,
so
very well.
the storeroom would generally be informed about this particular areas of requirement, dietary requirement, and purchases along that line would facilitate that situation.
I want to thank everyone for their contributions. At this time, I'd like to invite Mr. Roger, Mr. Duke, and Mr. Lewis to make their closing remarks. I'd like, Mr. Roger, if you would, in your closing remarks, brief closing remarks, but I'd like you to focus on if there are any recommendations that come from Vision on a Mission with respect to the remand yard in terms of physical layout and infrastructure that you can make at this time that you would want to involve, including your closing remarks. Please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I am happy to hear this kind of discussion taking place at this point in time as well, right? I'm saying that because of the fact that I know some people would have known, and some people probably would not have known, that I actually was at one time the Commissioner of Prisons, right? And Mr. Husbands actually was the Chief Welfare Officer, right? So that we have an understanding of what is going on and things like that. But not only that, I want to say definitely that these guys have been doing and trying to do a good job as far as what has been happening, because I don't know why they didn't say certain things as well. And when I say certain things as well, things as it relates to how they were not supported in certain things that have the prison service where it is at this point in time, right? I mean, they didn't say it, so I will just mention that and move on, as the case may be, right? Because if they had gotten the kind of support in certain areas and certain things, certain people and things like that, it would have been different. For example, let me just show you something. Behind prison walls, right? That was in my time when the British transfer, how do you call it? Task Force report, sorry, right? As I started, I get excited and started to talk, right? But that, right? We started that, and as a result of that, we started to go to the community and things like that. And one of the things was this: a number of business owners and proprietors had blanked hosting behind prison walls. This is something that we had done to help the inmates within the prison system to get themselves together and what have you and things like that, to go out and what have you and all these sort of things like that, just as what you were talking about here, to get these people to, you know, be thinking right and what have you as the case may be. However, these people did not allow that to happen as the case may be. So that we had to come in another area, another way to deal with that, which we did. Right, and we had, as we call it, open prison walls, as the case may be. And as a result of that, what has happened is that we are in a position now, should it be, again, the Buddhist Task Force report, a lot of things would have taken place, but there's still a lot more to be done, as the case may be. What I want to talk about as well is this is what has been happening in recent times compared to what we were doing not doing, but where we were in the past when myself and Gordon husbands were there. For instance, just let me read something, please, ma'am. All right? In the past, we focused mainly on institutions having sentenced offenders when discussing corrections, so that we only talk about those who were convicted and everything like that, right? Discussions about pretrial remand were always secondary to discussions about prison. The approach is now passé. Therefore, pre-trial management and re-entry must be and are central to any discussions on public safety, public policy, as it relates to prison reform. So that is critical, and this is what I'm saying. Therefore, I'm happy to hear that sort of things going on, as the case may be. Interest in remand is grown as TNT citizens have become more aware of human rights, but also concerned about the incidence of violence, murder, mental illness, gang warfare, etc., and its relationship to public safety, victims' rights, inadequate levels of expenditure for public safety, and above all, the staggering growth of remand population levels, especially in the prison system. It should be noted that in modern-day corrections, human rights and statutory provisions that appear to corrections are numerous and complex and are constantly under review. Therefore, by keeping in mind the following few fundamental principles, administration can avoid more previous problems. And that is critical, Madam Chairman. And what I'm saying, therefore, to me, this is what you all are trying to deal with to prevent anything from getting worse, as the case may be. And that is going to support the prison officers, the administration, and what have you, as the case may be. I just want to say one thing, however, as well. That Buddhist Task Force report, I feel that you all should consider it more, because it is more
Criminal justice.
That's right, more criminal justice. And there was a lot of work that was done from the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manning, as far as what he had done, and he supported the Buddhist Task Force thing with respect. That's right. And out of that, a lot of things went on within the prison system that needs to be continued now. However, what is needed is the support from the government and other persons, private sectors and public people as well, to assist what is happening as far as the prison services alone. Because it cannot be that the prison alone has to do this job. Everyone has to do the job.
All right.
And that is important, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roger, and we will, as a committee, the Secretariat will take note of that and provide us with the Buddhist Task Force report.
Yes, ma'am. You want to get a copy of it? You see?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll get that. We'll get that because both myself and Gordon were a part of that as well.
All right,
so that we'll pass on something to you all. Yes?
Thank you so much. That will assist in our deliberations.
Okay then.
Could I invite Mr. Duke to make his closing remarks, brief closing remarks, and in your closing remarks, you mentioned quite a number of initiatives that have been taking place with respect to overcrowding and so on, and if there's any other challenge or initiative that you have not mentioned, you may want to take the time and the opportunity at this time to mention that as you wind up, so that we can have an idea of anything else that's happening to address the particular concerns with respect to the reports that would have been made on the prison service.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My memory right now cannot pull back some of these things that I might want to see, but what it is, I try to focus on maintain within this discussion that we have had is the fact that we've been impacted externally. The fact is that we have to manage the lives of persons whose liberty would have been taken from them, and a process of proving their guilt to some extent would have extended their stay with us. They stay in physical conditions that are quite demanding. For us, we are the people who have to manage that, and we have to mitigate against the problems that they face in living in this condition. The people who live here are not angels. Some of them are seriously problematic and pose a lot of risk to themselves, others, as well as the general staff of Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. We would like to see in trying to mitigate the situation that exists presently, that the greater concern in terms of looking at the requirements that we would need to manage the situation better, and bring greater success in terms of what we set out to do. So for me it is critical that in managing the process, all hands on board in terms of external agencies that impact the lives of the inmates and subsequent all lives, that all hands on board in terms of helping us to mitigate the situation in crime and help us to basically improve the lives of the persons who subsequently, whether they go back out as untried prisoners when in their case, or whether they graduate onto the prison system and would have served time, helping us in terms of getting that person back out, not obviously within reasonable shape or improved situations that they could be and contribute positively to members of Trinidad and Tobago society. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd invite Mr. Lewis to make his final submission.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I think after you listened to the submission this morning, particularly from the prison officers, I'm fairly confident that you would agree that given the constraints within which the men and women of the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service must operate, I want to suggest that they have been able to do exceedingly well in terms of upholding the human rights and dignity of those persons currently being held at the remand prison. And I think I want to use this opportunity, with your permission, Madam Chairman, to commend the officers of the prison service for their work. I also want to thank you, Chairman and members of this committee, for the opportunity given to us to be able to come here today and to describe some of what is happening. I also want to give you the assurance that we at the Ministry of National Security will continue in our efforts to see to the improvements of the conditions at the remand prison, of course with the aim in the medium to long term to the establishment or the construction of the new remand prison. Just one point with respect to the strategic plan, just to confirm what Mr. Duke has said, that document has actually reached the ministry's head office and is currently being used as part of our exercise at the ministry in the preparation of the ministry's wide strategic plan. And so again, I want to thank you and to give you the assurance that we are committed to the improvements within the prison service and, of course, committed to upholding the human rights of all of the persons incarcerated within the system. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So just to summarize, we have been looking today at and examining the human rights of inmates at the Remand Yard Prison. And what has been indicated as we are looking at the recommendations that have been made in various reports and what has been done about those recommendations, how they've been implemented and what's the progress, we have noted that one of the main issues identified was overcrowding and all the other issues that flow from the overcrowding situation. And we have noted that there have been some attempts at physical improvement at the remand yard. More beds have been purchased, a laundry has been constructed, toilets have or will be installed or were installed, some were installed. Right? There is an attempt to rotate remandees between the different remand sites so that there is no excess overcrowding, even though the overcrowding does exist. And there are plans to put additional toilets for use during the nighttime so that the pail system can be eliminated, and that those plans are at the stage of approval or going for approval. We also note that there is a definite plan in fiscal 2017-18 to begin construction of a new remand prison, and there's consideration of the electronic monitoring system happening, whether or not that can assist in reducing the numbers of the remand prisons. Also, we are noting that social issues of the remandees are being dealt with by the social welfare officers at the prison. We're also noting that the prison rules, which are supposed to be updated, are in the process of being updated, that educational, religious, and cultural, also sporting programs are available at the remand yard prisons for the use of the remandees, that there has been an attempt to increase the security with respect to the phones and the cell phones available to the remandees by putting in the jamming system, but to mitigate against the lack of contact, a system has been put in place for remandees to be able to maintain phone contact with their loved ones, that there is a strategic plan that has been submitted for consideration from the prison service to the Ministry of National Security, and that speaks to how the recommendations that have been proffered in the different documents are going to be dealt with, and that there is a library erected at the Golden Grove prison so that the prisoners can edify themselves. We also note, and the committee would have expressed some concerns, some of them being that while we are glad to know that the process is ongoing, the fact is that the rules have not yet been updated, and we have not been able to secure a deadline by which that will be done. The strategic plan, though we are happy to see that it's in discussion, it has not yet been implemented, so there is no set record of how the recommendations are going to be dealt with, and a process of monitoring evaluation to make sure that they are at this point in time. We look forward to that coming. We also are concerned with respect to the mental stress on first-time remandees and what systems are in place to, integrate them into the system, knowing that there would be a lot of stress associated with first time coming onto the remand prison. We also express the concern with the length of time that prisoners may spend in remand. We are concerned also that there is no charter which defines how the human rights of prisoners are to be dealt with, and by the different agencies as they go through the system. The concern is also registered that complaints coming from the remandees may not be, the system that is in place may not be seen as a free and fair system, and there may be some consideration to be taken into account with how that is done. That long-term remandees may have or experience the same issues with reintegration into society as persons who have been into the prison system actually incarcerated, and there is a need to mitigate against that feeling of being cut off from society while in remand yard. And there also should become some consideration given to a pre-trial, pre-release program for remandees that allows them to reintegrate themselves into society in a meaningful way. A concern is also raised with respect to the ratio of prison officers to inmates, being expressed as approximately 20-1, whereas the best practice is 6-1, and therefore there may be some issues with how the remandees are being dealt with in that regard. And the concern that there's also a balance to be struck between the necessary infrastructural changes that have to be made and our present economic circumstances, and the ability to be able to do all that is necessary and all that the prison service certainly would want to see done in order to deal with the human rights of those on remand. And so I really want to thank the officials who came out today, who were so frank and were able to deliver their concerns, their challenges, and their progress with us. We want to thank you for that. We want to thank our viewing and listening audience, those who contributed questions via social media. And we do want to thank also our secretariat, giving yeoman service. And we look forward to continued discussion on this issue of the human rights of the remandees in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.